Roxella TV. Roxella TV. Roxella TV. Roxella TV. Roxella TV.
Was the concept always to be a vault, or did you have earlier concepts of what the CDs would be?
There were earlier concepts. One was a Halliburton case, which was all silver and hardcore, and you couldn't even tell. It just looked like a big silver business case where you opened it up and just things, like a pop-up book, things just kind of came from it. And it became so expensive, I couldn't do it. And then when I talked with the Rhino folks, I literally hand drew what I wanted it to be. I saw a safe on wheels with hard metal hardware and doors and secret compartments and a 10 CD box set, 150 songs and so on. And their contribution was, well, it's from your vault. How come you're not calling it the vault? And I go, yeah, you're right. That was their contribution. The rest, literally the design, the combination, the stuff, that was mine. But they actually said, why don't you just call it the vault?
What's interesting is years ago you told me the idea for the title was Alter Ego, which is interesting because when you listen to the vault and having worked on it, there's such a kaleidoscope of musical styles and things like that. That's the thread, you know.
The original title of the box set, when I first started thinking about it, was going to be Monster. And then Paul heard that I was planning a box set and then thought, well, why don't we name a Kiss record Monster? This happens many times. I said, I'm going to write a song called Black Diamond about a black hooker, just like the Stones have Brown Sugar. You get it? Black Diamond, Brown Sugar. I wrote my own kind of Brown Sugar song called Black Diamond. He said, gee, that's a good idea. Next day he came in with a song called Black Diamond. Hey, what happened to my song? And so...
Same thing with Christine 16, right?
Christine 16 and Onward and Onward. And so Monster became a Kiss album title, and then I started thinking, well, why didn't I call it Alter Ego, which is what superheroes have. You know, you see them with the cape and all that, but they have a secret identity, which is what the box set is about. And then it dawned on me that the masses won't have a clue what alter ego means. It's not a phrase that people use often, unless you're a comic book geek like yours truly. And then eventually I didn't have a title for it for a while until it started to take shape. And Keith Valcourt, who was brought in by Rhino to work alongside me on the box set, actually said, well, why don't you call it The Vault?
Very nice. Well, you know, listening to the box and having worked on it, there's so much that goes beyond the sphere of Kiss, and that's what I really like about it, the eclecticism. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that. Was this a way to showcase to the world, because this is your legacy, that there's a much wider palette for what you can do? Was that in the back of your mind as well, to show off the other things you can do?
I didn't think about what it all meant, or do I have my mother's hips, or any of the other stuff that people tend to think about. I just wanted to share the stuff with the world because they're hidden. Whenever you meet anybody and you shake their hand and you go, hey, nice to see you, you get an impression, but you don't really have a clue who they are. You don't know what they're like. And we're all like that. We just get a glimpse of somebody and you get that surface thing. You don't know what's underneath that. So on the surface, perhaps they think of me as sharp-tongued, you know, the guy that says anything and doesn't give a fuck who thinks what about him. Mostly that's true. And people that don't know me at all think of drugs and alcohol and stuff, which is untrue. That part of it is just not appealing to me, and I've never played in that ballpark. Not because I have a judgment call on anybody else, although I refuse to surround myself with losers. Anybody that hurts themselves or their family or everybody else, they're not going to be around me. But I think everybody should do whatever they want to do with their lives. It's your choice. For me, straight and narrow. Work hard, be straight, clear mind, clear body, and then we all die anyway. So at the end, maybe it doesn't matter. But those are my choices. And, you know, my background and the history, they may think, oh, the chicks and stuff like that. Yeah, there have been there's been that and lots of it. But I actually am a family man. Love my kids, love Shannon. I've eventually married her twice, and I'm going to marry her again. Oh, yeah, she's building a house up in Canada. As soon as that's done, I'm going to marry her again in her house. Yes, she gets to keep that, and I have to ask her permission to get up there. And I'll continue to marry her until I die. It's the only marriage I've ever had. I'll never get divorced. And so people don't really know me, and that's okay too. I mean, I have no complaints really. But the reason for the box set is I had to bring it out of the shadows. Otherwise, this stuff is going to die. It's like throwing a party and you're the only one there. How sad is that? You want to be able to share your stuff with people, the people who like you and the people that hate you.
Was it also knowing there's much less road ahead than behind you, that, you know, now's the time to do it?
Well, I'm 68 now and I look really good. Still have hair on my head. It's quite a bit more on my back. Kiss continues to tour. We feel great. I feel strong. We're not quitting or playing any of that tug on your shirt sleeves routine. We'll continue to tour until it's no longer convincing. But I'm closer to the end than I was when I was 20. Let's call it for what it is. Do I think I'm going to die next year? Probably not. 75 or 80, perhaps. 90, but that's around the corner. That could be, 8 years away, or 10 years. 10 years away is 78. So that's not so long. Better to do it now. The most boring and infuriating thing would be if I died today and then some record company uses the word posthumous. It's like, you don't know this, but here's some tunes he never released. Well, fuck, if you're going to throw a party, can I please come to my own party?
I'm curious about the eclecticism in your writing, which you can hear on this box set. The pre-Kiss material is really fascinating to me because it's all over the place. But when you sit down to write, or through the years, is that eclecticism still coming out in what you're writing? Or are you still... Is it
yeah.
still what you're just coming... It's still what comes out. It's not always fitting the Kiss
No.
milieu.
What comes out is what comes out. People don't know that I started playing guitar first. I never knew that McCartney actually was a guitar player first and then picked up a bass because they didn't have a bass player. And one of them had to do it, so he wound up doing it even though it was backwards, I don't mean backwards, left-handed bass. Sorry, left-handed bass instead of right-handed. And so it was a shock to me when I first started hearing the McCartney solo stuff, and he played everything, and engineered, and produced, and arranged, and sang all the parts, and played the keyboards and the solos. I was shocked, and then later on I found out the solo on Taxman, that's not George Harrison, that's Paul McCartney. And the deeper you get, the more surprises you get. And when you think it's, it's Harrison on guitar, no, it's John Lennon on I Want You. And it's somebody else on this and somebody else on that. And so, likewise with the Stones, some of those basses are not Bill Wyman, they're Keith Richards. And on Hendrix records, that's Hendrix playing bass on a lot of the stuff. But they don't tug on your shirt sleeves and say, hey, did you know that? So on some of the Kiss records, that's me playing the riff on War Machine and Almost Human and some other stuff. And on other Kiss albums, I didn't play bass. That's Eric Carr, our drummer, playing bass on I Still Love You. It's not me. So people don't know that stuff, and you don't. It's too much for them to understand. But I can play keyboards enough to express the songs I write, and I wrote the War Machine riff on a little kid's synthesizer keyboard that only had one octave. Ba-da, 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 which is why it's so awkward on a guitar and bass. You got to keep running around, but on a keyboard, it's right there. And so that was written on a synth keyboard, and Christine 16 was written on keyboards. And then...
How about some songs that we don't know that people will soon discover when they get the box that were also written on keyboard? Was You're My Reason for Living written on keyboard?
My Reason for Living was originally written on acoustic guitar, and the original demo doesn't even have a bass on it. That's me doing all the background parts and the harmonies and the solos and keyboards and all that. And I kept advancing it, and then eventually wound up on a synth kind of keyboard. And I always loved Marmalade's song, all my sorrow, sad tomorrow, take me back to my, what was it called?
Pieces of My Life?
Reflections
Reflections of My
of my life,
Life. Yeah.
which doesn't appear in the song at all. It's just a title. But the way it builds in the verse, I always love that keyboard figure. So I borrowed that keyboard figure, and wrote, I'm crying, I'm dying, deep inside I'm lying, every time I call your name. So those things came out very easily and very fast against those chords. And then I used the older chorus, You're My Reason for Living.
What's really interesting about the box set, and I think people will discover, is the Frankenstein nature of your writing process, where you're pulling things from, you're continually working and whittling away like it's clay or whatever it is, or a project with wood, and you're moving things in like they're pieces and interchangeable at times. Talk a bit about that element of what you do and when that started and that continued as an evolution in your writing process.
When I first started writing songs, nobody ever taught me how to do it. You just start, I learned a few chords, C, A minor, G, and an F and G. So those first songs, just like a lot of the original rock songs, were written using those chords with different melodies. And then the more I read about the Beatles especially, and about how McCartney would come in, or Lennon would come in, and the other one would say, well, I don't like that, how about putting this in? A Day in the Life is an example where you'd have, woke up, get out of bed. That's a totally different song that McCartney started working on. That was put together with A Day in the Life, and somehow they made it all work. Or somebody might stick in a middle eight, which is like a bridge or a different chorus. Somebody would have a chorus, somebody would have a verse. And when I was writing by myself, I never thought much about anything. It was very linear. And then I started move. Gee, I like this chorus, but the rest of the verse doesn't do anything for me. And then when I met Paul, we started doing that, the thing that the Beatles were doing. I'd come in with a verse, a song called Drive Me Wild, which was inspired by Stephen King's Christine, the car that had a soul as a female, twin orbs in the night, just female stuff. You drive me wild, I'll drive you crazy. Still talking about a car as a sexual sort of fantasy. And then Paul added Rock and Roll All Night on top of that. You drive us wild, we'll drive you crazy, as a relationship between the fans and the band. And then Paul put the icing on the cake. Frankenstein songwriting. I later found out that many writers do that when they write with other people. Hey, I've got a verse. And when I sat down and wrote with Dylan, I had a piece of something I was working on, and hey, that's got a good feel. That was my Dylan. And he would take that and develop that a little more, and you just toss the ball back and forth, and you get something. But there are bits and pieces, sometimes of other things that didn't quite work out, but hey, that piece is pretty good.
Rock Salad TV. 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 Rock Salad TV.
Okay, kids, you want to know where, how? Go to GeneSimmonsVault.com. GeneSimmonsVault.com.